Graduates, you all may be seated. Graduates, families, and faculty, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the 81st Commencement at the Institute of Design at IIT. Woo-hoo. My name is Shari Jones. I am the Director of Student Success here at ID. I will serve as your MC of sorts for the special occasion. So our students have worked really hard to get here, so cheer, clap, give high energy. This is a great special occasion. So, without further ado, it is my distinct honor to introduce our first speaker, our Interim Dean Anijo Mathew.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Okay. Okay, that procession was something, huh? For those of you who may not know, the song is called Pomp and Circumstance. And that version was the trap remix version, thanks to our very own Shari. Quite appropriate for ID, where we remix everything. Welcome to the 81st commencement ceremony of the Institute of Design at Illinois Tech, and the first one in many years. And we know who to blame for that, right? So a few weeks ago, I was having lunch with our board chair, Eric Larson. Eric is the chairman of Telia Holdings, a company that invests in food security, nutrition, sustainable food delivery. So Eric is an investor and a capitalist, okay? But for those who know him, he's also very well-read, a deep thinker, and extremely philosophical. So we got chatting over sandwiches. We started to talk about the philosophy of time. Yes, you heard it right, philosophy of time. What initiated the conversation was the story of a group of ID students who in 1952 were asked to sculpt a piece of wood into a shape that they could feel comfortable holding. That class was sponsored by Lever Brothers, and that shape eventually became the iconic Dove soap shape. You may even hold it the next time you go into your shower. Amazing, huh? The reason why your soap doesn't melt is because a group of ID students hacked at a block of wood. Amazing, right? As a society, we intrinsically understand the concept of time value of money. We are taught from a very young age how to invest our money. We know that the money that we have today is going to be more valuable tomorrow than it is today, and if we invest wisely, we can make a lot of money out of it. And so we are very careful about how we invest, what we invest in, where we invest money. Eric and I were wondering, what if we flipped the concept? What if we started to train ourselves and our children in the money value of time rather than the time value of money? We often see our lives at a scale that is understandable to us. We feel pleasure, pain, restlessness, anger, frustration, everything that impacts us, because it is at a time scale that we can understand. Seconds, minutes, hours, days, years. Yet, the impact of these decisions are often felt decades after you have made them. Our value to this world does not stay the same through the years. And just like money, if you invest your time properly, your actions will incrementally be more valuable tomorrow than it is today. Just like that bar of wood that became a bar of soap 70 years ago. Think about that for a second, pun intended. Let me give you an example of my own temporal journey. A few decades ago, a thinner version of me was sitting in these chairs just like you. I was waiting for the dean to finish his remarks so I could finally get my architecture degree and get on to the food. I had heard about the Institute of Design in Chicago. but I didn't even know where Chicago was. Fast forward a few years, and I realized that this is the place where the first concepts of human-centered design were being formulated. In these very halls, well, not these halls, but you get the idea, right? Then 14 years ago, I came to this place. I met these fabulous people that are sitting in the front. Marty Taylor was my first office mate. I was going to become a professor at the Institute of Design. And now, here I am, much more filled out, literally and metaphorically, addressing the next generation of change makers as the Dean of the Institute of Design. Isn't that crazy? Little did I imagine sitting in that chair that I would be here today. As you graduate from ID, you too will feel this way. Not because you got a good job or because of the amount of salary you make or the fact that you can sleep again. No. But because even though you may not see it today, one day, decades from now, you and what you learned at ID is going to make you more valuable to the world than you can ever imagine. You have been trained by these wonderful people, by us, to think in multi-generational design. Design that impacts not just us and the people around us, but our children, and maybe even their children. Parents, partners, children, family, friends, significant others, you too made an investment. Your investment has grown and become more valuable in 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, where's Jessica? Years. The ID community, the faculty, staff, and fellow students also made an investment. They invested in you, or we invested in you, because we knew the value it will bring in time. You may not know where you're going. You may not know what you will do in a decade. And trust me, it isn't going to be easy, or smooth, or painless, but you will do amazing things. Things that will impact the world for many generations. At that time, I hope you remember ID and everyone who invested their time in you. I hope you remember that it is in these halls that you first made the investment that eventually got you to where you are then. This year's graduation gift was carefully chosen as a constant reminder of that. It should it should help you look in the direction of ID from wherever you are. For those of you who cannot see, it's a specially engraved compass. There's just one problem. Thanks to supply chain issues, we don't have any to give you today. But you'll get it soon. All in good time. So as you walk up to get your degrees, I ask that you keep one thing in mind, that you are and will be exponentially more valuable to the world, everyone around you, and most importantly to yourself, because of what you did here at ID. That is the money value of time, your greatest investment. Thank you.
Okay. All right. We are now at the portion of our event that you all came here for and are ready for. We're now going to start the degree presentation. Kristen, if you'll come to that side. We're going to start with our PhD first, and then MDes, and then MDM, and so on and so forth. So, will our Spring 22 PhD graduate please stand and make your way to the stage? We're going to, that's right here, yep, okay. Jessica Meharry. All right. Okay. All right. MDes, Spring 22 graduates, please stand. You're going to follow the direction of Mariah to make your way to the stage. Come on. All right. You're going to stop here and give me your card. Then as I call your name, you're going to cross the stage. Okay. Ujwal Anand. Okay. Rodrigo Dyer. Jeff Sprague. Julian Walker. Arijit Patra. Royce Parker Joyner. Siwei Soon. All right, Jocelyn Gia. Ruaha Juan. I got it. Shinichiro Kuwahara. Elizabeth C. Ingley. Stephanie? Okay. All right, Stephanie Fan Ming. Amina Ansari. Faye Sun. Summer Tariq Anwar. Hugo Shao. Kelvin Yu. Subin Kim. Zaya Shen. Shenfone Gao. Awesome. Monica Villazon San Martin. Gary Bott. Kavia Rai. All right, next up is MDM. Will the MDM Spring 22 grads please stand? You're going to make your way that way. Or just come this way. Yeah, just come this way. Come around, yeah. And just come around and stop here. All right. Yep, give me your card. Okay. Okay. Yes. Yes. Takeshi Tanaka. Koda Fujikawa. Kevin Yamada. Takuya Isagawa. Young Hat Kim. Ron Martin. Heather Smith. Kat Reiser. Hey, what up? Douglas Sharma. Okay. We also want to acknowledge the ID grads of prior years. This is our first in-person ceremony since the pandemic. So will the Spring 21, Fall 20, Spring 20, and Fall 19 grads please stand? All right. You all can be seated. Okay, well, that concludes that portion. The next speaker would be Rodrigo Isasi? Yes. All right.
So at this time I acquired by Accenture in 2009. After this, Rodrigo moved on to become the CEO of Delosi, a food company that employs over 12,000 people. Rodrigo is a student of mine and is a perfect example of the money value of time. I don't think he could have imagined when we went to India that this is what you would be doing in 9 years. To hear his journey from ID to where he is now, please join me in welcoming Rodrigo Isasi.
Thank you very much. Dear ID community, dear graduates, perhaps the most overlooked factor in the traditional business world is the relevance of emotions. The fact remains that emotions drive our actions. They represent the most significant part of our memories, reality, and who we are. Unfortunately, this world of irrational rationality forces us to focus on to-do lists ignoring what we are feeling, or even worse, what others are feeling. On the other hand, as designers, we are bound to deal with emotions, give rise to them, and be accountable for them. Please accompany me in this exercise. Think about how you're feeling right now. Look inside yourself and try to describe your feelings. Hopefully, they are positive, right? Perhaps you're feeling a sense of excitement, accomplishment, achievement, and pride in your heart. Or maybe anxiety and nostalgia for the friends and the life you have shared during these years. Every habit you have built has transformed you. And you know that you are no longer the same person, not only because of the tools and knowledge you received from these great masterminds, but also because of the connections you made and the challenges you have faced. You are now someone who is ready to unleash from the bottom of your heart all your energy out into the world. Please remember this feeling. Embrace it, nurture it, and keep it with you. You will need it, and the world will need it. I can see myself 9 years ago ready for a challenge, sitting there in a world facing digital transformation, filled with excitement, surrounded by opportunities to be an entrepreneur and help organizations in this journey. But today we witness different times. We can see the cracks that the abrupt impact of the past period breakdown and slow recovery has left in our societies. Therefore, it is a time to rebuild, where each activity we do will inflict change. And while that change came out through growth in the past, today it is imperative to bridge our evident disparity gap, whether newly created or just revealed, like if we as society have been wearing the emperor's new clothes. We are also seeing a polarization of opinions, intolerance, hate, fear. This design constraint will be present and persistent in everything you design from the years to come. But as my outstanding storytelling teachers at ID taught me, this is time to act not as heroes but as mentors. It is time to design a more humane and fair world. You will bring magical objects, artifacts, and solutions to transform that fear into purpose, joy, understanding, and calmness. Does this sound too idealistic? Maybe. Apathetic? Never. This is what ID is all about, and which is why I came here. And now let me share 5 takeaways that empower me and enable me to keep it up during these years. First, find and embrace your craft. When the design thinking movie came out, Marty Thaler invited me and some students to a private event viewing at Gensler, where other designers joined to watch and share the film. I really enjoyed everything about that student outing, walking and chatting together from the old ID building in La Salle, getting there, the office tour, the screening room set up at the movie itself. Everything for me was a reaffirmation of being in the right place. Until this skate designer, sitting in the background, abruptly started a debate. Notoriously angrily, because he disagreed that a scientist in the movie who appears designing experiments could call himself a designer. I came to ID like other MDMs with no design background, so the imposter syndrome came to me and I questioned myself, am I a designer? Can I call myself a designer? Although the answer to that question may be obvious to you right now, it was a defining moment for me. After which I understood that designers need a craft. They need materials and a transformation object. And so I needed to find mine. And mine became the organization's culture. From that moment on, my creative energy expanded, and I committed myself to understand how culture works, how it can be shaped or modeled, and how it can be resilient and adapt over time. Leading a design firm of 200 people with my partners, and now a corporation of 12,000 people, it is about shaping culture every day through example and consistency. But most of all, with passion and explicit intention of creating an extraordinary workplace where people can make progress as professionals and as individuals. Ditching the cultural fit mantra to replace it with a cultural curation approach is vital. That means seeing each individual as someone who will contribute to the culture with their uniqueness and potential. So thanks, skate designer, wherever you are. Now culture is my craft, my material. Second, value ideas, concepts, intentions, and never be ashamed to bring forth those that have not seen the light. In my former workplace, they permanently cataloged me as a dreamer. Upon returning from a 3-year expat experience, I had this formal feedback meeting with my former and new boss. Both were wonderful people, and the feedback was really going well, until one of them made fun of me, saying I was like a hot air balloon they needed to bring back to Earth. I really often felt ashamed of this, afraid they would see me as someone who did not execute, someone who only brought ideas to the table. I think that is why I put in twice as much effort, and I spent many hours of my day working hard, but deep down, I knew that it was time that I was taking from my family and myself. Over time, I have seen no harm in flying. It is more than necessary to be that balloon that does not allow itself to be pulled back to the ground, because it gives you the courage to lead change. I also know how dangerous is the opposite, not to question, executing without an idea or intention. This is a direct path to mediocrity and even malpractices sometimes. Do not accept phrases that reduce your work to just ideas, just concepts, and just intentions. The world requires good ideas. In reality, we lack ideas, revolutionary concepts, and new solutions that can free us from false dilemmas and ideology myopia. Third, work with purpose. You know this one. If not, you wouldn't be here. So let me share my purpose. I genuinely believe that business is a good thing, something virtuous. It is the ability to organize people to solve a problem. It drives on efficiency, scale, innovation, and sustainability. However, it is an idea that has lost its drive due to the bad practices and prejudice exacerbated by political tensions worldwide. Therefore, I am committed to seeking change from within, using the strength of design and innovation to reshape the reality and build a contribution vehicle. Companies are part of a system. We must recognize that and ask ourselves how can we serve and put our capabilities at the service of this system. Fourth, nourish your communities of support. ID is a beautiful blend of diverse individuals who share an eagerness to create new meaning out of the simplest and at the same time most complex aspects of the human life. It is an excellent network of good people, wisdom, and affection. So please don't lose the connection. Stay close, come back in a while, and share what you are doing and what matters to you. Every time I have raised my hand seeking help from people in this community, I have had a response. Mentors, inspiration, critique, and of course a couple of beers in some city. I am very grateful because here I met my former in situ partners. I am what I am thanks to ID. Finally, don't keep it just for work. Don't deprive your loved ones of your magic. Don't become the angry comedian or the dull rock star. Reach out to your loved ones with empathy and create them a life that you don't regret. Be persistent. Don't try to be perfect. After all, every day is a prototype of the next. Never forget to communicate. Make their happiness and yours your craft. Please let me finish with a poem of Mario Benedetti and then a translation based on Paul Arker's one. No te salves, no te quedes inmóvil al borde del camino. No congeles el júbilo, no quieras con desgano. No te salves ahora ni nunca. No te salves. No te llenes de calma. No reserves del mundo solo un rincón tranquilo. No dejes caer los párpados pesados como juicios. No te quedes sin labios. No te duermas sin sueño. No te pienses sin sangre. No te juzgues sin tiempo. Don't keep yourself safe. Don't remain idly by the side of the road. Don't freeze the joy you should feel. Don't love with reluctance. Don't save yourself now or ever. Don't keep yourself safe. Don't be filled with a deep calm. Don't reserve yourself just a quiet corner in the world. Don't let your eyelids fall heavily as judgments. Don't lose your voice. Don't sleep without sleepiness. Don't imagine yourself without blood. Don't judge yourself without time. Thank you very much.
Okay, our next speaker is one of our Spring 22 graduates, Royce Parker Joyner.
Hey everybody, thank you all for being here today to celebrate with us. Really appreciate it, and everybody who's graduating does too. I wanted to begin real quick by introducing myself, and telling you why I came to ID. It might help sort of give you an understanding of a few points I want to make later. Then I want to give you a feel for how this place ticks and what we've been doing for the last 2 years. And lastly, I want to tell you what time and my experience at ID have revealed to me about my journey that I believe will give me the strength to stay hungry and inspired for my future ventures. My full name is Royce Etienne Parker Joyner. I'm from Memphis, Tennessee, the most beautiful land in the world. And as the program says, I have a background in architecture, furniture design, fabrication, that in combination spans almost 10 years. I have made music for nearly 15 years of my life in many different capacities, from engineering to production to recording for myself and others. I've had the privilege of working with many artists and designers from around the world, both successful and unsuccessful. I am currently making one very angry by having to delay contract work in order to graduate, like I told him before we started. But hey, it's worth it. I've seen and worked in the ratty studio filled with a lifetime full of artwork and prototypes, the uninsulated, dusty industrial park warehouse that cranks out sculptures like clockwork, the open-plan architecture studio with interior samples lying everywhere, and the industrial design studio with sketches and models decorating every surface. I've seen a small nonprofit composed of artists and a history professor lead a community revitalization project that became the marvel of an entire city. I've seen the effects of opportunity zones from both the developers and the residents' perspectives. I've talked to up-and-coming entrepreneurs about business grants that might help them build their perfect office. And I've learned from the early wave of business model canvas using lean startup entrepreneurs. I've seen footage, and given this, I know what design is, or so I hoped. You see, while I've had all of these experiences, and many more, all that touch on the world of design, there is one characteristic that ties my experience with them all together, and it goes beyond the marvel of the end product. No one can truly communicate their process effectively, and the journey to the solution often suffers as a result. The process is always so bespoke to the designer that it becomes a chore to reach out to the client, the community, or even the internal teams working on the project. Before ID, I saw this problem of communicating process materialize over and over again. It appeared in strained interpersonal relationships. It was the cause of misleading user and designer experiences. It led to narrow and sometimes non-existent avenues for collaboration and wild inconsistency in project outcomes. No matter whether it was in art, architecture, music, or any other discipline, this was the case. You know, it's funny, initially as an architectural designer in school, The closest reveal we got to understanding process were the lauded horror stories about how some skyscraper was designed based on one man's watercolor paintings, or on the back of a napkin, or by throwing sticks on the ground and divining some relationship from how they overlapped with one another. I went on thinking that this uneasy period, this process from formulating a concept to producing it and delivering it, was a siloed individual exercise. Sure, sometimes there was a forced, to be otherwise sporadic, charrette or planning meeting, but those were really just there to make this process seem open. These were the moments I felt lost and unable to engage, unsure of how to advocate for my abilities as a designer, unsure of my future in the field. So I want you to remember those moments and think of a time when you might have felt this way in your work. Let's give it a name. Let's call it the pit. Hold on to that, because we're going to address these times later and how we can feel more confident in them when we feel isolated. At some point, I remember being introduced to diagrams from an architectural firm called BIG, or Bjarke Ingels Group. Each project was reduced to a simple yet powerful step-by-step cartoonish diagram that conveyed their process of producing a complex urban implementation, whether that was a park or a building or a skyscraper or anything. Clear a plot of land with a swooping arrow. Re-level it to the perfect grade with another. Pour a foundation with a drawing of a picture, and build a multi-use structure with color-coded Lego blocks. In the length of a comic strip, they had created a document that was usable by all parties involved and served as the perfect outline to understand what it really meant to invest in the expensive undertaking of architecture. That was for me, or that was it for me. I was determined to make this level of insight, this clarity, part of everything that I did. And from then on, I knew that there must be a better way to design and communicate throughout the process effectively and with simplicity. This is what brought me to the Institute of Design. The promise of a codification of tools, methods, techniques of the design workflow that set it apart from other choices for graduate school. The others were fine, some very exciting in their prestige, others enticing for their focus on mastering a trade skill or specialty, but none of them focused on process, which is what I saw as the key to unlocking my skill set. Did it work? Well, as I recently told told a classmate who asked me how I felt about graduating, ask me in a couple weeks when I'm not having an out-of-body experience trying to do all of these assignments. But future me says, I feel like I got what I came for in spades, and I'm hungrier than ever to do the work. On site, anywhere, everywhere, all day long. At least that's what I said to myself, but that's how I really felt. Now I want you to remember that moment too. It's the opposite of the pit, it's the peak. Exuberantly exploring, experiencing, and working hard. The moment you feel proud about. So now I'll get into a little bit about what we did here at ID. When I first came to ID, I was surprised by two things. First, how different everyone looked from how I had imagined them over a Zoom screen. Like I had whole backstories for all of you. Whole visions that extended just beyond the Zoom window, all dashed in exchange for a richer reality that came into focus when we met in person after the masks. And then how open and willing everyone was to start from zero and learn. I think this openness from people who were so fervently looking for a change and a new skill set was what laid the foundation for the collaborative community we have today. Even though a pandemic that created all sorts of seen and unforeseen issues, even through them. But outside of our cohorts, what was ID? What was the culture that already existed? What did we do here? These are some of the moments that I will hopefully remember with my fellow graduates. Starting off remotely while trying to figure out what this program really was and beginning to understand people's creativity through their humorous Zoom backgrounds. Being thrust into teams and scheduling meetings in every time zone imaginable, still having the willingness to make it work because you loved your teammates and you felt responsible for their experience as much as your own. All of these efforts converging as we tried to cope our way through that phase of the pandemic wherever we were. Realizing that that foresight thing made teamwork hit different, I felt like a child again. You mean I just get to be me and the rest of the team complements that because they are who they are? Sounds great. Feeling like you got the cheat code when you found a framework that could perfectly explain your topic for the moment, and asking yourself the question, am I just the framework now, or do I have the abilities outside of this? Because if somebody else finds this, I might be in trouble. Understanding that all of the building blocks about user experience or user research, storytelling, experience design would come together in every other class, allowing you to repeat your process to create a new perspective. Waking up early every morning to continue pushing that perspective or new direction because it felt like breaking new ground for you and the client you were partnered with that semester. And finally, noting that after ID, you will be able to drop at least 10 words into a generator and Frankenstein your professional title, and nobody can tell you a thing about it. These moments for me comprise what I call the pocket. For those of you who did not go to school here, I recognize that those examples may be hard to put into meaning. And I know that my responsibility, at least in part today, is to provide cover for fellow classmates as they wait for that first post-grad paycheck in order to justify their pursuit of design and to their friends and families. Like many experiences in life, though, it can be easier to highlight how special a moment is by contrasting it with the moments around it. What was life like before this experience? What will life be like after? This helps to identify exactly what was special about that moment, about the moment at hand. This is how I've been thinking about ID. So I invite my fellow alumni to ask themselves, before you started working in design, how did it feel outside of ID? You know, before times. What was it like pre-ID? Outside of the passion for breaking down the problems we address, outside of the attentiveness we have to the individuals we design with and for, outside of the comfort we feel within our community of people attempting to accomplish similar goals in wildly different contexts. Do you remember what that felt like before all of this? For me, like clockwork, about a week after my last classes ended every semester, everything that I had been dealing with or not dealing with outside of the ID sandbox crept back into focus. It was stifling. I started feeling the built-up stress of following a career path which is difficult to boil down to a resume or a specific job placement. I felt imposter syndrome. I had gone down yet another professional path, and one in which I would have to convince skeptical clients and coworkers about how to accomplish something, and that the process of that was just as important as accomplishing the thing itself. I was fearful of being stuck working in a town where any upward mobility seemed like a long shot, no matter what skills you brought to the table. I love my city, but in Memphis, unless you own something, you control nothing. And I felt intensely and all over again guilty for choosing myself, for leaving home and moving to Chicago after the death of my father. All for the hope that this program, this graduate school, would get me closer to an idea about how I could put all of these pieces of a career together in some kind of useful, forward-thinking package. All of those creeping doubts that I mentioned before aren't unique. And while we as designers attempt to be the glue that binds groups together through translation, clarity, and synthesis, we are still only human. Our passion for design is linked to our self-worth, and that makes us vulnerable to the pit, that unpredictable place outside of the comfortable community, in our case, ID. If you don't have a network of support, as many of us might not starting out in our new ventures, it's easy to get stuck here, in the pit. And as advocates and trailblazers for new processes, we hold a lot of responsibility that can compound our predicaments. In my last few months, in order to alleviate some of this pressure, I catch myself thinking about many of the moments in my journey before ID that might have been contentious or where I might have felt a call to action that I couldn't yet answer. With the perspective of these last 2 years, I now look back on these moments and realize that I was reaching for ID's version of design, and that gives me solace. I remember when, as an entry-level architecture designer, I found a stream of new business for my small firm, but didn't quite have the words or the confidence to communicate how it could work. While the first project may be a large investment, if we could refine the design to a simple product, we might be able to make subsequent products profitable. At ID, I learned that this is a mode of value creation. I remember when I found myself at 19 in a room full of doctors, nurses, and hospital administration discussing how to move at-risk patients from an old hospital building to a new one. And I, for the first time, witnessed a strategy that did not include the primary stakeholders in the families of those patients and the patients themselves, as they lost out to construction timelines and building permits. At ID, I learned that my desire to recognize an opportunity through conversation with those most involved was design. And lastly, I remember when I transitioned from architecture school to work life and realized that I was really more enamored with what were the larger issues we were trying to address through the connected fabric of the built environment rather than construction management. And at ID, I learned how to break issues down into components of the system and solve for each in priority that made the most sense. Looking back on all of these moments at different phases of my journey and how they're connected through a consistent energy gives me the strength to stay confident when I find myself isolated, away from the people that I understand or that understand me and what I bring to the table. When I'm in the pit. So I encourage you, go back through your past, make note of these moments to ease your mind about the decisions in your future. You are on a path, you have been leaving breadcrumbs behind this entire time. Write them down, stretch them out, put them in a framework, find your patterns, and determine how they can help you make sense of where you're going next. Thanks.
Hey, our final speaker is Monica Villazon San Martin. She's also a Spring 22 graduate. Welcome, Monica.
Thanks, Shari. Hello, everyone. So 3 weeks ago, during a job interview, one of those we all had a lot lately, the interview asked me a question that I'm still thinking about. What is your biggest learning, not only from school, but from your whole experience as a graduate student? It was a hard question in that moment. We've been flying through projects, assignments, prototypes, readings, and well, interviews. So I hadn't really had a lot of time to take everything in and reflect on what we are accomplishing, and maybe you haven't either. So I took 30 seconds to reflect on this question, and nervously, I gave the best answer I could. But that question has really got my brain going. It's been coming to my mind every day since that interview. And that's what I want to share with all of you today. My biggest learning, not only from my time in classes, but from my whole experience during my time at graduate school. When I reflect on my experience at ID, I find it reassuring to remember what we all learned together. We have learned methods to understanding the world that it is. We have learned tools to envision the future. And we've learned process to design that future. I'll leave my Master's of Design program feeling confident that, as I grow in my career, I am equipped to envision futures for almost any problem. And while it's exciting to know that I'll leave ID a better designer than I came, for me, it's the learning that made me grow as a person that has made the biggest impact. Before ID, sometimes I felt like two different people. First, I was Monica, an idealist who believes in sustainability and equity and wants to make change for better. But I only knew how to do this through volunteering and giving my hands on time, not through design. On a different level, there was Monica, the designer, a professional with great skills, working on big ventures, designing for profit, and designing to make processes more efficient. Naturally, this is the Monica who decided to come to ID. looking to get a better professional future. But I didn't want to sacrifice the first Monica. It's an important part of who I am. And while I wanted to combine them, I couldn't envision how. I never imagined a way to make them become the same person. A way that, through my career and my professional life, I could demonstrate and activate my personal values and really contribute to our society. But that's just what happened over my 2 years here. The two Monicas I just described became one, seamless Monica, through her time at ID. One of my favorite projects at ID was the anti-racist pop-ups with Chris Ross. In this project, we use our skills to help people design a better future, an anti-racist future. And through it, we open conversations, hard conversations. Planning the workshop, setting up the logistics, getting the right words onto worksheets, partnering with the restaurants, and finding the right wood structure to bring everything to life. Everything. Everything was worth it when I saw the first couple of girls living together, still talking about racism after our 5 minutes activity. I felt proud, and I felt happy. I felt, for the first time in real life, that I could change the world through what I liked the most doing. Now, I know not just I can do it, but I know how to design the better world I believe in. Through my experience at ID, I learned how to merge these two Monicas. For me, this is the most significant learning experience during these 2 years. I leave ID thinking like a designer. Yes, I can do it. But also, always questioning myself, but should I? Is this the right project? Is this the right approach? Does it deserve my time and attention? How will it contribute to our world? Through all my system classes, I learned to map out the unintended consequences and potential outcomes of the future we're designing, and ask, do we mind provoking these consequences? What can we do to avoid them? How can we come up with a better answer that considers all these elements? So as we all go on today and leave the world to design great new things, I want to invite you to think about what is right. Which problem should we solve, and for whom? Which world do we really want to create? What does the world need? Here are some things that come to my mind when I think of the world I want to create. We need a world where equity is a reality and where people have access to opportunities. We need a world that is inclusive. And we need a world where people care for the environment. I want to design products, services, policies, and systems that not only create financial benefit for my employer, but really create value in a larger way and do something to enhance people's lives. So I want to encourage you, fellow graduates, consider your values and your worldviews. Take more than 30 seconds to reflect on what you learned at ID. But then, see how it affects the designer you are. Try to marry your personal values with your professional ambitions. We are a mix of the choices we make. We are a mix of the chances we get and the choices we make. The choices we all make, these value-laden choices, will shape the world that all of us live in. Ask the hard questions, the ones that you should know be on the table, but nobody is asking. But more importantly, keep asking yourself, should I design it? As designers, we are taking on the responsibility of making these choices. It is our responsibility to choose which problems to solve, whose problems to solve, and the kind of world we are creating. We've come a long way to graduating today. Long days at Kaplan, long nights at Zoom. Finding a time to meet with your team, which was especially hard when one of your teammates was on the other side of the world. Dealing with the plotter when you had the Moco's assignment due in the next hour. Or learning the level of fidelity for Carlos's prototype. I want to thank our professors and staff, our family, parents and partners, our friends, and our great community. We wouldn't be here without all of you, so we owe it to you. We have a responsibility to you, to ourselves, and to our planet. I want to end with an encouragement to all my fellow graduates. Wherever you go after today, remember, design is your superpower and how you can change the world. Be the person who cares about more than someone. Be that person who cares about more than what somebody is telling you to do. Be that designer who says, yes, we can do it, but should we? Thank you.
Okay. right, let's give a hand clap for all of our speakers today. Well, we have reached the end of our ceremony, so will all of our grads please stand? Spring 22 and the prior years, everybody just please stand. I present to you the class of Spring 2022. Woo! Congrats to you all. We wish you all success in your future endeavors, and please think of us and come back and visit. Immediately after this ceremony, graduates and faculty, we're going to have a group photo outside in the front. So once you leave, you'll be guided outside to take a picture. So now we're going to, guests feel free to have refreshments. They're available while we're outside taking our group photo. So at this time, we're going to ask that our faculty please stand, and we're going to depart out via the middle aisle and be guided by Mariah back in the back. So you all can exit. Yes.
Thanks, Shari.
Okay, and MDes, please follow the faculty. Third row, follow. Yep.